I beg to move that this House do now adjourn.
The question is that this House do now adjourn. Dr Zabir Ahmed.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Civilians always pay the highest price in conflict. Medical aid during conflict, we know, is critical to saving lives and, more importantly, is protected under international law. Yet, in recent conflicts, much of this life-saving aid has been denied. Not only does this shame all of us on a basic human level, but as a surgeon, where healthcare and aid have been at the forefront of my professional life, and notably where I've been directly involved in providing aid, I feel this as a particular pain. Madam Deputy Speaker, I wish to raise this debate to highlight that civilians are impacted, medical aid workers are impacted by armed conflict. Everyone caught up in conflict has an inalienable right to aid, and it is not the gift of any country or anybody else. Indeed, and I note that under international human rights law, the rights of the wounded and sick must be respected in all circumstances. Attempts upon their lives and violence against their person are strictly prohibited. Willfully killing them or causing great suffering or serious injury to their bodies or to their health constitutes war crimes as grave breaches of the Geneva Conventions. It is not just those typically physically injured by conflict that medical aid supports. It is those that need insulin for diabetes, dialysis machines to keep their kidney function working, and antibiotics to treat life-threatening bacterial infections. I will.
Madam Deputy Speaker, first of all, can I commend the Honourable Gentleman for Glasgow South West in bringing this forward. I spoke to him beforehand, and I commend him for bringing this forward. It's such an important issue. Does the Honourable Member not agree that even during the worst of the world wars, and there's been some terrible wars over the last few years, and still is, the Red Cross symbolises medical aid, was always a signal of ceasefire, and that there must still be the case today, and we must further encourage all of our allies and friends across the world to ensure that medical aid is never prevented from reaching those who need it the most. Thank you.
I thank my honourable friend for adumbrating that so eloquently, and I wholeheartedly agree with every word and every sentiment. It is not just those that physically injured by conflict that medical aid supports. It is those with other medical diseases, as I was alluding to earlier. People who need basic medical support that have been caught up in struggle. The figures support this. In Lebanon, 74% of people over 50 have 2 or more chronic conditions, and so are at increased risk during times of conflict. But it is clear that in current world conflicts, the same rate of aid is not getting through. Those suffering in Gaza are not receiving the same aid. Since April 2023, the escalation of armed violence in Sudan has resulted in famine and displacement. But to our credit, in November 2024, this UK Labour government has increased aid to Sudan by £113 million, including medical aid. This has provided medical staff, outpatient consultations, emergency room admissions, and access to feeding programmes for children and for adults. Of course, there is lots more to do. Since Putin invaded Ukraine in 2022, the UK has made £5 billion in non-military contributions and a total of £457 million in humanitarian support, including medical aid. And this is in addition to what people are doing on the ground, locally, in every city in this country, including my own of Glasgow, where my friend and surgical colleague, Mr. Vladislav Shemeko, a consultant surgeon at the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital, has personally sent tons of medical aid to Ukraine. I pay tribute to his tireless, selfless work and those of other charity workers whose contributions have saved thousands of lives.
Will my honourable friend give way?
I will.
I thank my honourable friend for bringing this fantastic debate, and the whole House should be of great benefit from his medical expertise but also his political commitment to this issue. I had the great honour last week of hosting a meeting in Parliament to hear the heartbreaking testimony of Professor Nizam Mahmood, a former good friend of his and a former colleague of his who's a great transplant surgeon. Professor Mahmood explained how during his work in Gaza this year for medical aid for Palestinians, he treated child victims of drone strikes and of snipers' bullets. He said that he'd worked in war zones around the world, but nothing had been as horrific as what he'd seen in the repeated regular attacks on children in Gaza by the Israeli Defence Force. So would my honourable friend agree that if the Israeli government is allowed to get away with, under international law, what it's doing in Gaza, that other regimes around the world will see it as a green light for thinking that civilians and medical staff are a legitimate target in war zones?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm very grateful for my honourable friend's intervention, and I think it highlights, particularly in this country, our adherence to the international rules-based order. We must comply with international law always, even and particularly perhaps when it may seem difficult. I would also like to acknowledge the important work of organisations such as Islamic Relief, who work in my constituency of Glasgow South West and, of course, throughout the UK and indeed the world. Since October 2023, Islamic Relief has provided over £30 million in aid and delivered over 51 million hot meals in Gaza alone, and this is not including its work in South Sudan. Despite this, medical aid is severely restricted in Gaza. UNRWA and other aid agencies have been unable to deliver essential medical equipment, such as medical swabs to stem bleeding or life-saving medications, such as penicillin. Essential vaccine campaign rollouts have been delayed, and this has all been compounded by this weekend's events. I'll give way.
I thank the honourable friend for giving way, and I pay tribute to him for securing this very important debate. As well as providing valuable aid to various areas of conflict and need, does my honourable friend agree that the UK and organisations like the UN should do more to enable the delivery of that aid to those people in need and take action against looters and oppressors who stop that aid getting to those in need?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm grateful for my honourable friend for his intervention and wholeheartedly agree with his sentiments that aid should not be impeded by anyone, whether it be state actors or individual criminals. Further aid, of course, at the moment in Gaza has been suspended following an Israeli airstrike that killed 5 humanitarian workers employed by the US-based organisation World Central Kitchen. The UN has said stopping the delivery of aid into Gaza because of the threat posed by arms gangs is necessary. UNRWA's final decision comes after the latest airstrike. According to the Famine Review Committee, famine is a strong likelihood in Gaza. My conversations with colleagues on the ground in the region have confirmed how scarce food is, with very limited meat, cheese, snacks, fruit and vegetables. I understand that people are now surviving off rationed rice. Can I ask the Minister what conversations she has had with international partners to ensure that famine does not break out in Gaza? As an international actor, it is imperative that we ensure that international law is upheld and medical aid reaches people caught up in conflict everywhere. International law dictates that people who are providing medical tasks must always be respected and, more importantly, protected. Medical professionals in the region are risking their lives to treat the injured and ill. My honourable friend made mention of my colleague, Professor Nizam Mahmood, who recently returned from a month of performing surgical operations in Gaza. He told me when he was there and on his return of the lives that he tried to save in increasingly difficult circumstances. He described it to me as hell on earth. What discussions has the Minister had with regional actors, including the Israeli government, about ensuring the safety of those delivering medical aid in Gaza? Ambassador Barbara Woodward, UK Permanent Representative to the UN, recently said to the UN Security Council, "There is no justification for denying civilians access to essential supplies. The government of Israel must do more to protect civilians, civilian infrastructure, and allow aid to be delivered safely and at scale." I am sure these words are endorsed wholeheartedly by all members of this House. I am proud that this Labour government restored funding to UNRWA, provided £21 million to support its work, and has given £5.5 million to UK Med, supporting their life-saving work in Gaza. This is necessary funding and aid but I do wonder whether it goes far enough. My concern, our concern, now is how we ensure that the correct amount of aid reaches the people of Gaza. What discussions has the Minister had with the Israeli government to allow aid convoys to enter safely into the region? Children in Gaza are dying and suffering needlessly. Nearly 70% of people killed in Gaza are women and children, according to UN Human Rights Watch. The report has found unprecedented levels of international legal violations, including the right to medical aid. This includes children now having complex medical needs without access to the requisite specialists in any other country nearby. Can I ask the Minister what discussions that could be had with regional actors and the UN about potentially bringing such children with complex medical needs to the United Kingdom for treatment, as some of our international partners have already started doing? I conclude by reiterating the salient point that anyone caught up in conflict has the right to aid. It is not a gift or an act of benevolence by anyone else. We must ensure now that our record on this issue is one that future generations of this House can look back at, not with regret or contrition, but with pride.
Minister Catherine West.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I've had an excellent debate from the Honourable Member for Glasgow South West. I congratulate him on securing this debate for his work in the National Health Service and for his ongoing commitment as a surgeon and his deep expertise on this issue. And I'm also grateful for the other interventions from other members here, and I will try to respond to the points raised. The debate takes place at a timely moment because the Minister for Development is actually in Cairo as we speak at the Gaza Humanitarian Conference, discussing, amongst other issues, the importance of ensuring that aid workers, including medical workers, can operate effectively and that civilians have access to the services they need. The Foreign Secretary has also, alongside his French and German counterparts, written this week to the Government of Israel to urge stronger action. But let me begin by paying tribute to the extraordinary work aid organisations and health workers are doing in some of the harshest conditions around the world. And as you would expect, the UK firmly supports all efforts to prevent conflict in the first instance. But where conflict does occur, those affected must have access to medical services. Medical workers and facilities must be protected in line with international humanitarian law. Access to medical services includes routine care for pregnant women, safe delivery of babies, child vaccinations, and primary health care for all. These services are always important, but especially so when people are desperate to reach a safe place. Food and clean water are scarce, and sexual violence is an increased threat, as is so common during conflicts. The tragic loss of life of health workers, including in Gaza and Sudan, is a stark reminder of the dangers faced by those who deliver life-saving medical assistance during conflict and crisis. Now let me turn to how the UK is helping. In short, we're acting on three key fronts. Firstly, we remain committed to promoting compliance with international humanitarian law and encouraging its respect by all parties to armed conflict. We're working to minimise impacts on civilians by protecting health workers and medical facilities, and working with the United Nations and the Red Cross to ensure that those affected by the conflict have access to the help they need, and by signing up to the political declaration on strengthening the protection of civilians from the humanitarian consequences arising from the use of explosive weapons in populated areas. We reaffirm long-standing and ongoing efforts to protect civilians in this regard. Secondly, we're targeting our aid towards those most in need, whether that's by providing medical supplies, helping train medical staff, or indeed ensuring that they have safe access to patients.
I thank the Minister for giving way. Can the Minister inform the House how much of the aid provided by the UK is actually getting into Gaza and to the people who need it?
Well, the most recent figure in open sources from the weekend is of the usual 500 lorries into Gaza, there's about 67. That was from the weekend in the press. And I'm very pleased that the Honourable Member for Glasgow South did talk about the importance of aid getting in, and we have redoubled our efforts in terms of diplomacy to implore that access be improved so that we can get that aid in, because we have tripled the aid, but what's important is that we gain access. And that is the case whether it is in the Gaza conflict, whether it is in Sudan, whether it is in helping desperately ill people in Myanmar, all across the globe where that's an issue. We are making access a key issue in terms of our diplomacy work. Sometimes we're more successful at that than other times, but we try and work across international organisations to ensure that crucial access for patients. The FCDO is also funding these partner organisations within countries, the World Health Organization, UN agencies and the Red Cross, helping them to prepare for and respond to conflicts effectively, supporting a range of specialist NGOs, non-government organisations and local partners to deliver critical medical services at the front line, especially where no other partner can deliver, because that's the key strength of locally led organisations, since they are staffed by people from the affected areas and the communities themselves. Finally, the third way we're helping is by deploying specialist medical teams on the ground, and of this the Honourable Member has a great deal of knowledge.
On that point, would the Minister give way? Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Will the Minister join me in, first of all, commending my honourable friend for securing the adjournment debate, but, Madam Deputy Speaker and Minister, my honourable friend will be too modest to highlight his considerable skill and knowledge on this subject. Before taking his place in this House, he in fact practised as a transplant surgeon in my constituency of West Dunbartonshire and my hometown of Clydebank, where he worked in the Golden Jubilee Hospital. Does the Minister agree with me that the situation in Gaza is catastrophic now? Gazans are desperate need of food, shelter and medical need with the onset of winter, and that the UK should be the lead voice in ensuring real-world humanitarian solutions?
I thank him for highlighting the expertise of our honourable friend, but also I thought very modestly our honourable friend actually mentioned another colleague from Scotland, and it is these professionals who make such a difference on the ground, and I know that the whole House is thankful to them for their work, and I'm sure that the member for West Dunbartonshire is particularly excited to have these experts in his constituency. And these specialist medical teams on the ground, we know that there are times when the health system of a country is so depleted during conflict that there simply is not the capacity to help people despite international support. That's why we invest in the UK's official emergency medical team, so that we can deploy specialist medical staff to help save lives. And as the Honourable Member for Glasgow South West will be aware, the team's made up of these highly qualified medics from around the UK and beyond our shores, and trained to deliver high-quality surgical and specialist rehabilitation care to save lives and reduce disability. For example, the British Emergency Medical Team has recently started providing services in Lebanon, treating patients with burns and other injuries. The same team has helped alleviate suffering in Gaza this year. Until now, they have provided 275,000 patient consultations across a wide range of medical services. And of course, he's mentioned the winter, and there's a new term in the world of aid called winterisation, where the aid organisations club together to address the specific issues that come up at this time of the year. I'm sure honourable members will agree that it's an extraordinary accomplishment under the most challenging of circumstances, and yet perhaps one story captures the impact of all strands of our work better than anything could. And I'd like to share with the House the story of a 3-year-old girl called Razan from Gaza. In the early mornings hours of the 1st of September, a bullet passed through the thin fabric of the family's tent. It went through her mother's hip and lodged into the neck of their child. The child was rushed to a hospital run by UK Med and funded by the FCDO, and the mother taken to another facility with her own life-threatening injury. The little 3-year-old girl was in surgery for 3 hours. in a tented field hospital surrounded by fighting, fear and uncertainty. Miraculously, the bullet had narrowly missed her spinal cord, and thanks to the skilled work of the UK surgical team, the bullet was removed and she has recently been discharged. This is only one story among 250,000 patient consultations seen by the British team, and it brings home the importance of the trained medics, the critical supplies and the safe access that we talked of earlier. Specifically on the point of evacuations, I've got a note here that I just wanted to refer to so that I was able to answer the honourable member's question specifically on evacuations, because we all know that the plight of sick and injured people in Gaza is deeply distressing. But we've tried to work very closely with Israel, asking them to engage with partners to urgently establish sustained, safe and timely passage for patients who need medical or surgical interventions not available in Gaza. And we recently announced £1 million for the Egyptian Ministry of Health and Population, delivered through WHO Egypt, to support medically evacuated Palestinians from Gaza, because that's so close to the region. The UK is also supporting the provision of essential health care to civilians in Gaza, including support to UK Med for operating their field hospital. And there are provisions that allow Palestinians to come to the UK for private medical treatment under the immigration rules. Where a relevant application is made, consideration will be given to exceptional circumstances or where there are compelling or compassionate grounds. The government is keeping all options under review in response to events in Gaza. In conclusion, Madam Deputy Speaker, the UK remains fully committed to protecting medical workers and ensuring people have access to medical aid during conflicts. While those three actions are making a tangible difference on the ground, there is, of course, more to do. That's why we will continue to advocate for the protection of the most vulnerable, address barriers to accessing medical services, and strengthen our own medical and surgical capabilities to deploy in conflicts. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker.
The question is that this House to now adjourn. As many as are of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. Order, order.